The one thing about guitars, and you hear this a lot, different engineers will tell you about kind of mixing starts at the recording stage. So recording a good signal in the first place will prevent you having to do mixing later. And in principle, that kind of makes sense, really. You think, oh, let's get everything sounding really great, um, and it'll all work out. And that I can see that. But the other thing about things is once you've got loads of other sounds all competing, let's say you've got synthesizers, pianos, vocals, drums, and guitars, then that guitar sounding great on its own might not sound great when everything's playing. It might just sound muddy, it might sound undefined. And so, yeah, that's the whole point of mixing is balancing things and shaping things. Plus, I think I like to make things sound a little bit different maybe than being like perfect and amazing. I like to kind of make things sound unique and characterful. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But just with the guitars, really, are often quite problematic in mixes because they can be quite brittle, they can be quite bassy, they can be everything. There's so many different varieties of sounds. Start using pedals and distortion, things get pretty unruly. So you generally do have to do quite a lot of mixing work to get that to fit into the track that you're working on. If the track only has guitar, or it just has one guitar, bass, and drums, you can actually have a lot less mixing to do because the guitar is one of the main elements. But when you're trying to put guitar into a track with lots of other stuff going on, you do need to kind of find little ways to do that in the context of your music. So I'm going to be looking at a bit of that now with this track I mixed and co-produced for Emnoir, which is a really lovely song, very deep, very kind of dreamy, very like pop noir, so it's quite dark. And she had this like MIDI guitar sound as a mock-up, and then I replaced it with the real guitar sound. I did need to do some sonic shaping to get this to work really well in the track. So anyway, I'll just play it with everything, all my processing on. It's this kind of guitar that runs through the song.
Onto my bedroom wall. Those people
So it's up front, it's cutting through, and it's got that sort of cowboy western moody thing going on. So how did that sound when I recorded it? Well, let's take all of the various plugins I'm using off. And it's a combination of EQ, compression, some modulation, saturation, spring reverb, and tremolo. So that's a quick fast forward. First off, this is the sound without any processing. Doesn't have to impact, does it? So first off, EQ. If I deactivate the bands that I'm using, you'll see the guitar signal itself has a lot of low end here. It has a lot of boominess. Pretty well balanced, but it just wasn't cutting through. I actually focused on the mid range. I made the guitar sound less rich, a bit kind of more small and pokey. Secondly, I used the LA2A compressor a lot on guitars. It can be a very quick fix. It can be very instant volume. It's got a great gain circuit in there, so it really does a nice volume boost, quite rich. It adds lots of tone, but also the peak reduction. I actually threw it on there just to try and do a little bit of peak reduction, but actually just a very quick way of getting the gain up. The needle is moving a little bit there. So there is some compression going on, but it's subtle. And then I'm using the Pro Q3. That's taken out certain mid-range frequencies, which will be because those frequencies are very, very prevalent in one of the other sounds in the track. So that's kind of reducing the masking, making it a bit more clearer in the mix. Next up, this warm choral stock plugin. That's actually doing pitch modulation slightly and panning without it. The sound is very down the middle, kind of there, very kind of flat. And and then suddenly it's got a bit more stereo, a bit of wonkiness, and that modulation, that slight pitch modulation, the vibrato, is helping it to pop out of the mix because it's sort of going in and out of tune all the time. So that modulation just gives it more of a vivid feeling. Next up, the saturator. But with it, it's just got more bite, and the output is matched. I think it's roughly gain matched, but it's just got a tiny bit of drive, and I'm just basically using the soft sine setting just to add some saturation in the high end. Helps it cut through. Now the spring reverb is next. I love this spring reverb by Arturia. It's got quite a dark tone to it, so it's adding spatial stuff like spring reverb, but not extra energy in the high end. Always love a bit of spring reverb, especially on these kind of like surfy, cinematic noir guitars. And then finally, I'm using a tremolo, which is just a real simple tremolo effect. It's a fast trem, and tremolo and reverb together are just a kind of a classic sort of surf rock cowboy guitar. The other final thing I was doing is I was actually sending some of this sound via a bus to a delay and reverb using the Ableton Echo basically. So it's got a bit of filtering on there. It's got a bit of reverb, and it's got a long feedback, and that's just really just added mood and vibe. It's not loads and loads, but in the mix it just does a little bit of extra, a bit more movement, and in a way it might help it actually glue the guitar into the track a little bit, but quite subtle.
Spinning, shifting. Did you feel it?
It's worth mentioning that there's another guitar in there, which is this sound, which is from the original demo. And that sound is a very different sound entirely to the sound that I added. And so one sound is warm, loads of reverb, a little bit more percussive. So I've let that sound kind of occupy that sonic space, and then the extra guitar. So it gives some tension, it gives extra richness because the two guitars aren't at all alike in terms of their sound, so you can hear them both contributing. So yeah, that's always worth thinking about when you're working on your track. Think about the sound you're adding in. Obviously get a good sound as you can at the source, but then sometimes it is necessary to shape things and actually mold things so that they work in their best way in the track. I remember hearing I think it was Bob Rock or someone who worked with Metallica. They're known for their big chunky guitar sound. He was saying, I think once, you'd be quite shocked if you heard some of the sounds in solo mode in some of their records. Like you'd think that all of the guitars that were recorded all sounded massive, but if you just keep layering on more massive sounds, it just becomes mud. They don't compound to get bigger. They just start to muddy things up because there's only so much space in the frequency spectrum. So to add more sounds into all of that denseness, you actually have to find ways to make them smaller so they cut through, and like they might sound really bad on their own, but when they're in the mix it's just it adds what it needs. So whilst I respect the concept of getting the sound great at source and not having to touch it very much, I also think that there's a big argument for still needing to actually shape the sound afterwards, and actually just try experimenting. If you're into your lo-fi stuff, there's producers and engineers like Sean Everett who are purposefully setting up situations to get weird, mad, bad sounds and then sculpting them to make something interesting. So, and he's got Grammys. Anyway, hope that's useful. Hope that's inspiring. Let me know if you've got any questions. I'm just going to try and be doing a bit more mixing related content for you people. Hopefully it's useful.